Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Under the Loupe with Marco Nicolini, and I'm very proud to present a few beautiful pieces today and one special big piece. We're going to have a trio of vintage watches to talk about, and that is going to be the 1675, the 6265, and the 18078. For a quick wrist check today, I'm wearing the Oyster Flex Chocolate Sky Dweller, and it's a 326235. And I must say, I've been wearing this for for about a week now. And I have to say, I actually really love this watch. It's super comfortable. It's the right weight. This is the type of modern watch I love because it's just so different from everything else that you see out in the wild. You don't see these too often. And it does get looks. People definitely stop and they take a look at it and they're like, it's just a lot of watch going on. So it's a little bigger than I typically wear, but it fits, like I said, it wears well. So that's my wrist check for the day. So what I'm holding here is a Rolex 1675, and this is really the GMT design that really took off the series. This is the watch that really married the heritage to what Rolex is doing now. So if you look at this watch and you're not really seeing much different compared to the modern version other than, modern upgrades. But as far as design, you're getting the same watch. You have the Jubilee bracelet, you have the Pepsi insert, you have the dial, the layout, the way it is. Being that this is a vintage GMT Pepsi, they haven't really done much as far as aesthetics go. The biggest upgrades that Rolex has done to this watch is simply upgraded everything around this design. As you can see, it still kind of resembles what Rolex is still producing today, just with a lot more magic, in my opinion, a lot more heritage to this watch than what you're seeing with the modern variations. Because obviously now you have the ceramic bezel, the super maxi cases that they're using now. The bracelets are far different than they are now. Even though they look the same, as far as being a Jubilee bracelet, they are quite different. And this watch right here is a special watch that we're going to talk about because it is the 1675 fuchsia bezel. So if you know anything about GMTs, you will know that the bezels are always the center of attention when it comes to these watches, meaning when people see them, they always want to see that really cool faded bezel, or they want to see that black bezel with the really fat font numbers and so forth. But here you have a fuchsia bezel insert, which means it is actually more of a pink color instead of the classic blue and red. It is blue and pink. A lot of nicknames around this watch. Mostly the nickname I hear the most is the Pink Panther. This watch is very much in used condition. It's been loved. Most of the time, these bracelets are just pretty much gone. But this one actually has held up. And something funny that I noticed about it the other day is it looks like they replaced one of those links with something generic or something from another watch, but I thought that was pretty funny. But otherwise, this is a watch I would pretty much just take this bracelet off and wear on a strap. Most GMTs I tend to talk about have a quick set date, or they have a jumping hour. They have some way to change the date. But with this watch, you simply have to advance the time. So to change the date on this watch, you would think you can go through the crown or maybe jump the hour around, but it's not the case with the 1675. With the 1675, you're actually having to advance the time over and over and over until you get to that date you want. So if that's the 20th, you would have to just keep going. If you had to get to the first, go get yourself a coffee, relax. You're going to spend a minute with this watch because it's not going to be an easy task. It's kind of frustrating, but that's why we love the 16750, which looks identical to this, but it's got the upgraded movement that allows you to change the date at the flick of a crown. So another thing to talk about is the dial. 1675s have come in many, many dial variations, especially the earlier gilt series that have the high gloss dials. There's so many unique features with those that you have to really look carefully at every one of those, because there could be something so simple that makes the price dramatically more money than what you could find on your typical matte dial. So this is what's called the matte dial, and this is a Mark I, or famously called a long E. And the reason they call it a long E is if you look at the word Rolex and you go down to the E, it kind of looks elongated. So the E is very elongated. It's very sought after, and it's the only dial that really accepts the fuchsia bezel. So if you had a fuchsia bezel on a later matte dial, there's a chance it was probably just added. And they do work on some of the gilt dials. So the later gilt dials, there's a sweet spot where these inserts were really found on the, on these watches. So you really don't find these on 76s, 77, 78. This is more of like a 1966 to 1971 type of thing. So, that's kind of the window you're going to find those fuchsia bezels. Another thing to notate about this bracelet is they are actually rolled. The way they're they're pushed together. They're kind of like rolled over on themselves and they're crimped. So as you know, the later Jubilee bracelets are not crimped. They're solid pieces and the backsides are all flat, which probably makes it a little bit more comfortable, probably doesn't pinch you as much. And another interesting thing is back in the day, bracelets weren't always made in Switzerland. You know, these bracelets were actually made in the USA, they were made in Mexico, and so on. But what's really cool about this watch is it's a 1969, and something you got to learn about vintage watches, if you have the serial number, you should 9 out of 10 times look at the clasp and check to see if it's also dated. And this one is. It's the fourth quarter of 1968. So as long as we're within a year, we're typically okay with that. We like to accept that as correct. Personally, I love this watch, but a lot of guys out there prefer more patina. This one is more eggshell, which some people like that too. Everybody has their own, has their own opinion about that. My opinion is if you're going to buy a 1675, why not get one with more patina? But at the same time, this watch does give you that classical feel. A 1675 typically goes for $14,000 to $16,000 on average for a really nice Mark 1, but this being a Mark 1 with the fuchsia, prices are anywhere between $20,000 to $23,000 and up to $30,000 to $35,000 for unpolished full sets with the fuchsia bezel. The bezel alone, I've seen those go for around $3,000 to $5,000, just depends on how nice they are. This one's in decent condition. It's not the best, not the worst. What I like about this one is it's got nice fading and it's not too scratched up. So finding these without a bunch of scratches, as old as they are, is very nice. It means it was well kept. And the watch is pretty thick and even itself. It's a nice piece. This one we're going to be asking around $20,000 for this guy. The next watch I want to talk about, it's a very, very interesting watch. You don't see presidents like this too often. And especially the dial, that's something to talk about. And that watch is going to be the 18078 single quick set bark bezel, bark bracelet, and wood dial. So this is indeed actually made out of wood. So one thing Rolex was doing back in those days is they were really focusing on being creative with these dials. So back then you would find these Stella dials, which demand a huge premium, stone dials, which obviously demand a huge premium, and this dial, which is probably, outside of all the other dials, this dial probably demands the least amount of premium outside of your normal dials. And one cool thing about birchwood is every dial is going to look completely different. It's almost like a meteorite dial, except with a meteor you get pretty much the same tones every time, but with birchwood dials you actually see a lot of like very light colored, very, very dark colored dials. Sometimes you get like some really interesting swirl patterns, maybe sometimes even more of like a tree pattern, like where it's just kind of like a straight cut. I mean, I've never seen two dials even look similar. They're always very, very different. Like they just came from a completely different part of a tree. And I've seen some of these almost look black, and I've seen some that look almost like balsa colored. So they're really, really interesting. One thing you got to look out for when you're buying a birchwood dial is always ask the seller of that watch to carefully examine the dial for cracks, because there is a coat over that wood to preserve it. And if that coat is cracked, your dial is going to be worth less. And when you go to resell that watch, it might be more difficult. So this one came in for a client and it is sold. As you see, it has this bark bracelet, which is very, very interesting. These are just going to keep increasing in value. And I'll tell you why, because over the years, I've seen many clients buy these watches throughout the years and decided they didn't like the bark band, and they've actually sent them off to polishing guys to have it removed, which, the more you remove something, the more expensive it gets, because the stuff that's left untouched will just keep gaining value. So it'll be more of a novelty to have one that's not been polished, and it'll be more of a rarity, because then you don't have to, then you have a watch that was born the correct way. And another thing a lot of people do is they'll take that bezel off, this bark bezel, and they'll take that off and replace it with a 18038 bezel, which is not correct. But as you can see, everything on this watch is correct for a 18078. The only thing I'll say about this watch is the bracelet at one point was fixed, because now it is tight again. With these older presidents, bands typically start to stretch out, and you get a lot of play in them, and it's very frustrating because they start gapping out, and then when you put it on your wrist, it just kind of looks very loose and sad on the wrist. So it is okay to get them repaired, and it's very expensive. It's not something that to be taken lightly, because it is going to be between a $3,000 to $4,000 job. And back in those days, you could have bought a brand new bracelet for that price, but now Rolex bracelets are probably more like $6,000 to $7,000 for a nice for a nice presidential bracelet. But the problem is, good luck finding one that's the correct bark band. Market value on a 18078. These can get pretty up there, guys. This one in particular would probably go for around $17,000 simply because it's been fixed. But otherwise, this one does have box papers and is a complete set. But on the high side, these can be up to $25,000 to $26,000, being more like an NOS full set, never polished, perfect bracelet, no issues watch. I've seen them as high as that price point. So there you have it. That is the 18078. And this one actually does have a personalized engraving on the back. What does that say? It's Mickey Boy. All my love, Dad. So it looks like this was a gift to somebody at one point, but they've since sold it. So Mickey, if you're out there, I got your old watch. As you guys know, I'm a massive vintage Daytona lover, and I've been getting a lot of these in lately. And this one is no different, other than it has some very special characteristics to talk about. And that is the Rolex 6265. This particular one did just come in, and it just came in and it's still for sale. It's still available as this video is being shot, at least. And this one has a very special dial to talk about, and that is that it looks like a normal 6265 dial, but it's not a big red. But if you look very closely at the 6 o'clock position, you'll notice what looks like two O's. And if you see those two O's, that is going to indicate that this is in fact a Sigma dial. So something interesting about Sigma dials is there's actually an organization in Switzerland that came together and decided they wanted to see more gold on watches. So they created this crazy organization that wanted to officialize it, because as you know, these are going to be found on Rolexes. I've seen them on Pateks, and believe it or not, I've seen them on AP. So it's not just a unique characteristic to Rolex, it is actually very unique across the Holy Trinity. What it simply means is that dial went from using stainless steel markers, stainless steel hands, to white golds, or gold markers in a sense, but most of the time it's going to be white gold markers. So that it means that the hands and the markers here are actually made out of white gold, which it's very, very prominent between 1970 to really around 1974-ish. This is a 74. They kind of stopped doing that when they transitioned into the later dials, such as the big reds and so forth. The only thing that I noticed that was changed out are these pushers. This is too early to have these P302s as standard, so these are definitely added there after the fact, probably during services of some type. This should have P301 pushers. And if you guys have heard me in any of my other videos talk about pushers, you'll know that the P301s don't have those notches there. So if you look here, you'll see those notches. So everything else seems to be correct. This should have the 78360 bracelet with the 571 end links, which is correct. So everything's correct about the watch, minus the pushers, but pushers can be found typically for around, I don't know, they've been going up a lot lately, but I used to buy them for around $1,000 a set. Probably now they're probably about $2,500 to $3,000 a set. So if you find P301 loose, let me know. See if the client wants to put them on this watch, and we can go from there. A little bit about this vintage Daytona. These are not automatic movements. They're in fact manual wind movements. And the movement that this one would have would be the Valjoux 727, which is a Rolex movement, but it's a modified Valjoux. So it's basically an ETA movement that Rolex took and completely did a lot of upgrades to. They've actually slowed down the beat rate. It operates at 21,600 beats per hour and has a power reserve roughly of 48 hours. So you'll get a good 2 days out of this watch. Maybe a little bit over if it's a very, very clean, healthy movement. Price point of this watch. You can get a pretty good deal on these, actually. So one thing I would say about these 6265s, they are definitely a budget-friendly beginner vintage Daytona. You can get into these for anywhere from low 50s to mid 60s, depending on, characteristics and conditions and so forth. This one should be in the mid 60s, but we're asking a little less because of the pushers. We're asking 62.5 for this guy because it does have a Sigma dial. So that Sigma dial is going to make it a little bit more collectible than your average dial for a 6265 or 6263. Otherwise, case condition, everything else. Has it been polished? Yes. Is it over polished? Not really. I mean, it's not over polished and overused. Some of the numbers are a little bit worn off on the bezel, and that's just paint. That's actually not the metal being worn down. That's just the enamel that has come off, which is easy to re-enamel. A lot of guys can do it, so I'll probably have my guy do that. Just look out for it on the website at www.grandcaliber.com. So we got a big piece for you guys to see today, and it is a Patek Philippe. It is a 5990. It is the watch that Patek lovers around the world go crazy for. They drop crazy money on this piece, and I am excited to show you guys this unboxing. If you buy Pateks, try to keep this cardboard outer box. I know it sounds crazy and it looks like it's nothing. It looks like it's trash. In fact, the other day Deja found one of these. She's like, "Is this should I throw this away?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. Don't throw this away." Everything else is pretty much there. Even the foam. Save everything. I mean, these are watches you just want to have. You want this experience for the, for your buyer or your next person who's you want the experience of really unboxing. It's just a lot of fun. So the next thing, we'll put that aside. So we're just gonna, it just keeps going. It just keeps going. It's just crazy. It just doesn't stop. So take that out. We're still going. And there we have it. And that is the 5990/1A. And the /1A simply just means that it is on a bracelet. If it was a they don't make this watch, but if it was for an example, 5980/A, that just means it's on leather. The 1A, the 1R, all that stuff you'll see at the end of that number indicates the bracelet. So 1 is usually on a bracelet. No 1, just straight letter, is going to be on a leather strap. But let's dive right into this watch because this is such a crazy watch. This is a GMT chronograph with the local and home indicator, which is just absolutely stunning. This is such a beautiful watch. This one right here is brand new. This dial is absolutely beautiful. As you guys know, Patek Philippe just re-released this watch with the blue dial and stainless steel, which is just absolute fire, absolute insanity. But this one is still a very, very classic watch. You get date, you got GMT, you've got chrono. Now, here's the one thing that's missing about this watch. And I'll give you guys a second to look closely, and it drives a lot of people crazy. And if you guessed there's no running second hand, you are absolutely right. That is the most annoying thing about this watch, that you don't get that running second hand. So it's going to, it gives me anxiety if I don't have a second hand, because it makes me think, is the watch even running? Because I have to check it against my iPhone or do something else like, all right, is it really this time? Because nothing's running. The only way to get around it is doing this. If you run the chrono, then you have a running seconds, but I always like to argue with people and tell them it's not a good idea to constantly keep your chrono running just for the fact that it's an extra running second hand. It's just not good. It's just more wear and tear on your watch. But do people do it? Yes. Is it your watch to do so? Yeah. You can do whatever you want. But the other way to tell if it's running is just turn it over, because you have this beautiful display case back. Just look at the balance assembly, and there you go. If it's running, then you know it's running. So if it's staying still, then you might have a bigger problem on your hands. But yeah, one thing I really do like about these watches is you have these enormous buttons that kind of integrate with the design of the watch. It just gives you a really awesome feeling that you can just sit there and push on them, and they just kind of look the part. They don't look like they're actually something that, if I looked at this watch and didn't know anything about it, I wouldn't know that you could actually operate those. It just looks like it's just part of the case, but you in fact, use it to jump that hour hand around. And, it is a travel time chronograph. So you do have the chronograph aspect of it. And I do like the fact that you have the local and home indicator there. So you got the local indicator in white right now, and home is in black, which is day night. So it's a really cool watch. For market price for these are skyrocketing, because I do believe the 5990 is discontinued. So it is just making this watch go up in price. For brand new, you can find these from around $135 all the way to $165. Just again, depends on the seller. Sometimes people in different regions will ask all the money for these because they're just not around. With a retail price of $59,140, you can expect to find the resale value of this watch more than likely to be more than double the price. So more likely you're going to find them around $135 to $160-ish, give or take, just depend on the seller. But yeah, this one is going to be on our website right around $135,000. So definitely take a look at the website if this is something that interests you. And this one is, like I said, the condition of this one is truly brand new. The client did say he never wore it, but it was sized. So That is one thing I'll say about it. There you go, and that's the 5990/1A for you. Absolutely beautiful watch, and this is definitely one of these watches that I dream about owning one day because I'm a huge Patek fan. I've had a few Pateks throughout the years, and I personally have never owned a Nautilus, so that's one thing that I got to do on my bucket list. Thank you guys so much for watching Under the Loupe with me today, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And of course, love seeing your comments down below, so feel free to leave me one, and I'll see you next time.